His mother called me a useless woman and persuaded him to break off the engagement. We were together all our lives. And then I left the country. For good. I'm 32 years old, and I've known since I was a teenager that I can't have children. It's not just difficult, it's impossible. I have a rare medical condition that makes it physically unsafe and medically inadvisable for me to ever carry a pregnancy. Every specialist I've seen has said the same thing. No IVF. No surrogacy with my ex. Nothing. It's just not in the cards for me. For a long time it broke me. Watching friends get pregnant, feeling the pressure at every holiday, hearing relatives innocently ask when I was going to start a family, it all used to sting in ways I can't even describe. But over time I healed. I worked through the grief, found peace, and learned to stop defining myself by what my body couldn't do. I built a life full of purpose and joy outside of motherhood. I met Sam and we built something beautiful. I told him early in our relationship, long before anything got serious. He didn't flinch. Said he loved me for me and we could always consider adoption or not have kids at all. He just wanted me. That's what he said. But then came his mother. Mrs. Diane was always the polite type. Polite in that performative, overly sweet way that somehow makes you feel like you're doing something wrong just by existing. From the first time I met her, I knew she wasn't thrilled about me. She never said anything outright, but the way she asked where I saw myself in 5 years, the way her smile twitched when I said I didn't cook often, the way she always emphasized how family-oriented their clan was, it was all laced with judgment. Still I tried. I really tried. I brought wine to dinners, complimented her cooking, asked about her garden. I bit my tongue when she gave me unsolicited advice on how to keep a man interested. And for a while it worked, or at least I thought it did. Until last month. We had all gone to Sam's cousin's baby shower. I didn't want to go, it's always a minefield of awkward small talk and invasive questions. But Sam wanted to show support. So I went, smiled, and survived the usual landmine. So when are you two thinking of having one? I answered as I always do, with a tight smile and a vague, we're just enjoying our time together for now. But this time Diane overheard. And her face changed. Later that evening, after Sam had gone to help his uncle with the grill, she pulled me aside in the kitchen. I remember the way she wiped her hands on a towel, like she was preparing for a performance. Can I ask you something, woman to woman? I braced myself. Do you even want children? Or is this part of that whole modern career girl thing? I froze. I wasn't ready. I didn't owe her this part of me, but I also knew silence would only give her ammunition. So I told her, calmly, honestly. I said I couldn't have children. That it wasn't about ambition or selfishness or timing. That I physically couldn't. That I'd made peace with it and Sam had too. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. She didn't offer sympathy or kindness. She didn't say she was sorry. She said, well, have you tried everything? I told her I had. She sniffed and said, it's just, Sam's always wanted a big family. You know how important tradition is to us. I just hope you're not taking that away from him. It felt like she slapped me across the face. That night I didn't sleep. And the next time we saw her, everything was different. The passive-aggressive comments turned sharp. She started dropping hints about certain sacrifices women have to make, about how some people are just meant to nurture, about how time slips away before you know it. Sam didn't notice. Or maybe he did and just didn't want to deal with it. But I noticed, and I felt it deep in my bones. Because as much as I've made peace with my condition, I'm starting to wonder if the people around me ever will. I don't know how she found out. I had only told a few close people in Jack's family, and even then I'd been cautious, measured, careful not to seem like I was asking for pity. Maybe someone let it slip during a conversation. Maybe she overheard something. Maybe she went looking for something to use against me, some flaw to justify the way she's always looked at me like I didn't belong. All I know is that once she found out I couldn't have children, it was as if I'd become something less than human in her eyes. Not just a disappointment, but a defect. It started subtly. Cold stares. Sudden silences when I entered the room. Polite smiles that didn't reach her eyes. I could feel something shifting, but I tried to ignore it, telling myself I was being paranoid. Then she stopped inviting me to family dinners. If Jack brought me up, she'd change the subject. He thought she was just stressed, but I knew. I could feel it. She was pulling away because she knew. And then it got worse. One evening Jack came home looking disturbed, holding his phone like it had personally betrayed him. He told me his mother had called him and said, word for word, you're making a huge mistake. That woman is broken. She can't give you a real family. He was shaking when he told me. He was furious, said he'd defended me, hung up on her, but the damage was already done. I could see it in his eyes, the seed of doubt she'd planted, the way her words had cut deep, not just because of what she said, but because he never expected to hear something so cruel come from his own mother. But she didn't stop there. Over the next few weeks, she made it her mission to make sure the entire extended family knew about my condition. She told cousins, aunts, even Jack's elderly grandfather, who pulled me aside at a birthday party and said, "It's a shame, you're such a lovely girl otherwise." I stood there with a drink in my hand and a frozen smile on my face while everything inside me shattered. Jack's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. His cousins asked if he was really going to throw away his legacy by marrying me. His uncle made a joke at a barbecue about needing to freeze his sperm, just in case, and everyone laughed while Jack stared at the ground. I started dreading every family event, not because of the whispers or the glances, those I could handle, but because Jack was changing. Slowly. Quietly. He was withdrawing. He stopped talking about baby names, about the house we wanted, about our future in any real sense. One night, after another fight sparked by yet another one of his mother's subtle attacks, I asked him if he still wanted to marry me. He hesitated. Not for long, but long enough to rip the air out of my lungs. Then he said, "I do. I don't know how to shut her out. She's my mom." That's when I knew. She had already won the first round. Because if he couldn't shut her out now, when it was just me she was attacking, how would he ever protect me from what was still to come? I wasn't angry at Jack, not in the way people think. I was hurt. Deeply. But more than anything, I was exhausted. Exhausted from constantly having to prove that I was worthy of love, worthy of a life, even if I couldn't give someone a child. Exhausted from being seen as a walking wound instead of a whole woman. And maybe most of all, exhausted from having to smile through the campaign this woman had launched against me while pretending I didn't notice that it was working. Jack and I have been together for as long as I can remember, and sometimes I still catch myself marveling at how rare that is. We met when I was 9 years old and he was 10, two awkward kids with scraped knees and oversized backpacks who bonded over a shared hatred of math homework and a mutual love for running barefoot through the park near our houses. What started as an innocent friendship slowly, quietly, blossomed into something more. By high school we were the couple everyone teased, the married ones, they'd say, because we did everything together. Prom, yearbooks, after-school study sessions that turned into lazy conversations under blankets, dreaming about the future. We ended up choosing the same college not because we couldn't be apart, I think we could have, but because it felt like our lives had always run parallel, and neither of us saw a reason to change that. We moved in together sophomore year and made a little home out of secondhand furniture and too many mugs. For a while, we talked about marriage like it was something inevitable, like something that would happen whenever we got around to it. We were already so deeply entwined, a wedding just felt like a formality. So we postponed it. Year after year, not because we were unsure, but because we didn't feel the pressure to prove anything. We were happy. The kind of content that makes you forget to question it. But then everything changed in the space of a single sentence. My dad was diagnosed with an aggressive, terminal illness, something the doctors described in sterile terms I could barely comprehend, let alone accept. Watching him go from vibrant and sharp to frail and forgetful in a matter of weeks was like standing in a collapsing building, trying to memorize the wallpaper while the walls crumbled. It broke something in me I didn't know could break. And then one evening when I was sitting by his hospital bed with a book I wasn't really reading, he reached out, gently touched my hand and said, "I would really like to walk you down the aisle. If that's something we can still make happen." His voice was quiet but steady, and I knew he was trying not to cry. It hit me like a tidal wave. For years, Jack and I had been so comfortable in our little bubble, so wrapped up in the idea that we had forever, that we forgot how fragile time really is. I went home that night and told Jack we needed to stop waiting. That I wanted to get married soon. That I wanted my dad to be there, to do the thing he'd probably imagined since I was born. Jack held me close, kissed the top of my head and said, "Then let's do it. Whatever it takes." We planned everything in 3 weeks. It was chaotic and beautiful. A blur of flowers and borrowed decorations, favors from friends and rushed alterations. And for the first time in a long time I saw my dad light up. He was proud even as his body betrayed him. On the day of the wedding he wore a suit that hung a little too loose, and he clutched my arm tighter than he probably should have, but he walked me down the aisle with a dignity that made the whole room cry. That moment, it was everything. And yet, it was also the beginning of something unraveling. Because what I didn't realize then was that the urgency had stirred something in Jack. Not cold feet exactly, but fear, pressure, doubt. Things he hadn't voiced in the years we'd taken everything so slowly. And as we stood there, surrounded by people who thought they were witnessing the start of forever, something behind Jack's eyes told me he was already beginning to pull away. Jack always said he was okay with us not having biological children. From the very beginning, when I told him about my condition, the one that left me unable to carry a pregnancy, he didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, didn't make me feel like less of a woman. He just wrapped his arms around me and said that what mattered most was that we were together. Over the years, we talked openly and often about our options. Adoption had always been on the table. We even looked into agencies once, just casually, just to see what the process was like. He asked questions, took notes, held my hand while we talked to the coordinator. When the topic of surrogacy came up, he listened without judgment. We both agreed that love wasn't about biology. It was about choice, about intention, about showing up every day for each other and for whoever might join our family someday. I believed him. I believed that he meant every word, that he saw our future the same way I did, that even if our path to parenthood looked different, it still led us to the same place. I believed that he was on my side. Until that conversation with his mother. I wasn't supposed to hear it. He thought I was asleep. I had gone to bed early, exhausted from a long day of work and an even longer phone call with the insurance company about something unrelated. I'd been drifting in and out of sleep when I heard his voice in the hallway, low, hushed, but tense. And then hers. Cold, clipped, sharp in the way only she could be. I couldn't hear every word, but I heard enough. She can't even give you a real family. She's robbing you of something you deserve. You think love is enough now, but what about in 10 years? What about when your friends all have kids and you're stuck pretending to be okay? I waited for Jack to defend me, to shut her down, to say, as he always had before, that our love wasn't defined by biology and that I was more than enough. But he didn't. He was quiet for a long time. And when he finally spoke, his voice sounded so small, so uncertain. I just don't know what to think anymore. That sentence gutted me. I laid there in the dark, my heart pounding in my chest, feeling something crack deep inside of me. Because that wasn't just doubt. That was hesitation. That was the kind of silence that lets poison grow. Later that night, when he came to bed, he kissed my forehead like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just stood there while someone dismantled my worth piece by piece. Like he hadn't let it happen. And I didn't say a word. Because I wasn't ready to know if that was the moment everything changed. She forbade him to marry me. Those were her exact words, spoken with the kind of cold finality that didn't invite argument. Diane sat across from Jack in their living room, her spine stiff and her expression unreadable, and told him, "You're not marrying that woman. I won't allow it." It wasn't a plea or a warning, it was a command. I wasn't there when she said it, but Jack told me later, his voice hollow and tired, like he'd already aged a decade just replaying the moment in his mind. By then, she had already made her feelings about me painfully clear. After she found out I couldn't have children, she stopped pretending. The mask slipped, and underneath was a woman who viewed me not as a person, not even as a disappointment, but as an obstruction. Something to be removed, rewritten, undone. She started spreading lies, subtle at first, then brazen. To distant relatives, she whispered that I'd hidden my condition from Jack, that I'd tricked him. To closer family, she implied I was selfish, damaged, incapable of giving him what he truly deserved. And when someone challenged her, she'd shrug and say, "I'm just telling the truth." She didn't stop there. Diane took it upon herself to contact Jack's extended family one by one, painting a version of me that I didn't even recognize. She said I was manipulating Jack, keeping him from a real future, from children who carried his blood. She told people I was broken, that marrying me would mean cutting off the family line. Her words were soaked in cruelty, but she delivered them with the polished tone of a woman who believed herself morally superior. And it worked. Slowly, the RSVPs for our wedding stopped coming. Excuses piled up, travel issues, scheduling conflicts, vague apologies wrapped in platitudes. But we both knew the truth. She had poisoned them against me. Diane openly said she didn't want grandchildren, not of her own blood. I still remember the way those words hit me when Jack, eyes wet with frustration, told me what she'd said. It wasn't even subtle. She didn't want adopted grandchildren. Didn't want children born of surrogacy. If it didn't come from her, it wasn't worthy. And because I couldn't give her that, she saw me as a threat, as a stain on their legacy. The only person in his family who didn't fall in line was Jack's father. He quietly took my side. He wasn't loud about it, he never raised his voice, never confronted her directly, but he found ways to make it known. He pulled me aside after a family gathering once, gently touched my shoulder and said, "I see you. I see how strong you are. I'm sorry for how she's treating you." It was one of the few moments that made me feel like I wasn't completely alone in the storm. But even he couldn't change her. Diane ruled their household with quiet tyranny, and everyone tiptoed around her wrath like it was weather they couldn't control. Jack's father tried to reason with her, I know he did, but she dug in her heels and made it clear that if Jack went through with the wedding, she wanted no part of it. And true to her word, she didn't come. Neither did her sisters. Or her cousins. Half the seats on Jack's side of the ceremony were empty. We got married anyway. In a garden behind a friend's house, with string lights and trembling hands. It was beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. Jack said his vows with tears in his eyes, and I believed him when he said he loved me, but behind the joy was a shadow that neither of us could ignore. The weight of everything that had been stolen from us by a woman who refused to see me as anything but a threat to her bloodline. Jack came home and left me. Just like that. No fight, no warning, no tearful build-up. He walked through the door like a stranger in his own home, shoulders stiff, eyes distant, voice stripped of the warmth I had known for more than half my life. I had spent the whole evening thinking he was just caught up in traffic, maybe stayed a little longer than expected at his parents' place, maybe needed time to decompress before coming back to me. But when he walked in, I felt it immediately, something was wrong. He didn't kiss me. He didn't ask how my day was. He just stood in the entryway like he wasn't sure if he should even come inside. I asked him if everything was okay and he looked at me in a way that made my heart sink. He didn't answer at first, just stared like he was trying to find the right words to wound me gently. Then he finally said it. I've been thinking a lot. And I don't think this is going to work. I blinked, certain I'd misheard him. When I asked what he meant, he exhaled slowly and said, I want children. Real children. And you can't give them to me. It was like someone had poured ice water down my spine. The words weren't his, not really. They sounded rehearsed, like something he had been told to repeat until it became his truth. He kept going, saying things like, it's not fair to either of us, and, I need to be honest about what I want, but none of it sounded like him. It all sounded like her. Diane. Her voice through his mouth, her hatred bleeding into our love like ink in water. I asked him if this was really what he wanted or if someone had gotten into his head. He didn't deny it. He just said he had clarity now, after talking to his family. His family. Not ours. Not mine. I remember staring at him, trying to find a trace of the boy I met when I was 9, the boy who held my hand under the table at Thanksgiving, the man who stood beside me when my father was dying. But he wasn't there anymore. He was gone. Replaced by someone who believed that love wasn't enough if it couldn't come with a biological legacy. I didn't cry right away. I didn't scream. I just stood there in the middle of the living room we had once painted together and nodded slowly. Then I walked into the bedroom, pulled out my suitcase and began to pack. He didn't stop me. He didn't say my name. He didn't try to hold me or take it back. I left that night with my suitcase in one hand and my heart in the other and drove straight to my parents' house, where the porch light was on and the door was already open. A few days later, after the initial shock had worn off and the silence in my parents' guest room had started to feel suffocating, I made a decision. I was going home. Not just to escape the wreckage Jack had left behind, not just to get away from the shadows of his mother's cruelty or the pitying looks from people who didn't know what to say, but because deep down, I knew I needed to rebuild somewhere that felt like it belonged to me. My father is German, my mother American, and I was born in Hamburg. We moved away when I was a child, but I still remember the red brick streets, the smell of the bakery near our old apartment, the sound of my grandmother's voice echoing down the stairwell. Germany wasn't just a place, it was a part of me I had put away for too long, always meaning to return but never finding the right moment. Now it felt like the only place where I could breathe. My childhood friend Vanessa had stayed there after university, and we kept in touch all these years through late-night messages, holiday cards, and blurry video calls. When I told her what had happened, she didn't hesitate. She said, "Come here. Stay with me until you're on your feet. We'll figure it out." Her voice didn't carry pity, only warmth, and I clung to that like a lifeline. I gave her a 2-month notice, enough time to sort out the details, say my goodbyes, and finish packing what little of my life still felt worth taking with me. I started with the easy things, clothes, books, papers, then moved on to the harder ones. The picture frames I hadn't been able to throw away just yet, the necklace Jack gave me when we graduated college that I tucked into the bottom of a box, unsure whether to keep it or not. Every drawer held a memory, every closet a ghost. I packed quietly, methodically, like I was building a lifeboat out of my past, one item at a time. My parents offered to help, but I said no. I needed to do this alone. I needed to feel the weight of it all so I wouldn't carry it with me any longer than I had to. I booked a one-way ticket to Hamburg and marked the date on my calendar in red. It wasn't just a flight, it was a line drawn in the sand, a moment that meant I was choosing myself. For the first time in what felt like forever, I had something to look forward to. Not a person. Not a future shaped around someone else's expectations. Just a new beginning. A quiet promise to myself that this time I would build a life no one could take away from me. Before I left, before I could close the chapter for good, there was one last blow. One that shook me in a way I hadn't thought possible after everything we'd already been through. Jack came to my parents' house unannounced. It was late, already dark outside, and I could see the tension in his face the second I opened the door. He looked like a man unraveling, desperate and sleep-deprived, like he hadn't eaten in days or maybe hadn't stopped thinking long enough to even try. I hesitated, but I let him in, telling myself it was just a conversation. Just closure. We sat in the living room where I had spent so many evenings curled up with a blanket, trying to feel whole again. He started talking, rambling really, about regrets and confusion and how none of this was what he wanted, but he couldn't stop thinking about me, about us, about everything we'd lost. I listened. I cried too. There was a part of me that still ached, still missed who we used to be before all of this. For a moment, it almost felt like we were just two people trying to reach each other through the wreckage. And then something changed. He reached out, pulled me into a hug, and I let him, at first. He buried his face into my neck, whispered something I didn't catch, and then his hands started to move. One slipped lower, suddenly, aggressively, and he grabbed my ass like he had some right to me, like sorrow and nostalgia gave him permission. I froze for half a second before instinct kicked in, and I slapped him across the face as hard as I could. The sound rang through the room loud and sharp, and his eyes went wide, more in shock than guilt. He tried to speak, stammering, maybe trying to explain, maybe trying to twist it into something else, but I was already yelling, already telling him to get the hell out of my house before I made good on calling the police. He left, slamming the door behind him like he was the one who had been wronged. And just when I thought the worst had passed, the phone rang. It was his mother. Diane didn't waste time with pleasantries. She launched straight into threats, cold, venomous accusations that I had assaulted her son, that I was hysterical and unbalanced, and that if I didn't apologize she'd be contacting the police. She said I had scarred him. She said she had witnesses. She said I was not safe to be around men. I couldn't even respond, my hands were shaking too badly to hold the phone properly. But my dad was there. He'd heard enough from the hallway and walked right in, took the phone from my hand and told her, in a voice so calm it sent chills down my spine, that if she ever threatened me again, she'd be the one dealing with the police. He told her he knew everything, how she'd poisoned her son, how she'd slandered me, and how, if she thought for 1 second she could intimidate me into silence, she had severely underestimated the family I came from. She hung up. I sat on the couch and cried, not just because of what had happened, but because the person I thought I'd known since childhood had gone so far, had crossed a line so vile I couldn't even find the words for it. I wasn't just grieving love anymore, I was grieving safety, trust, and the version of myself that once believed none of this could happen. It was then that I knew, truly knew, leaving wasn't just the right thing to do. It was the only thing. I flew to Germany on March 1st. No wedding dress in my suitcase, no fiancé waiting on the other side, no diamond on my finger. But I carried something far heavier and more meaningful than any of those things. My dignity. It felt like stepping off the plane as a different version of myself, one who had been through fire and betrayal and grief but still stood tall, still refused to be broken. Hamburg greeted me with cold wind and gray skies, and somehow it felt right. The air was sharper than I remembered, like it was cutting away everything I had left behind. The first weeks were hard. Really hard. The day before my first job interview, I got an email saying it had been canceled due to rising concerns about the pandemic. Everything began to shut down almost overnight. Offices, schools, even the cafes I had planned to visit just to remind myself I was alive and in a new place. The world felt suspended in time, and so did I. For a while, I wondered if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. I would lie awake at night in Vanessa's guest room, staring at the ceiling, haunted by thoughts of Jack, of everything that had collapsed around me, and by the terrifying possibility that maybe I had lost too much to ever feel whole again. But Vanessa, Vanessa, she was a lifeline. She never pushed, never prodded. She simply let me exist in her space, and when her kids needed help with homeschooling or calming down during lockdown tantrums, I stepped in. It started small, helping with bedtime stories, making pancakes in the mornings, sitting with them during virtual classes. Their chaos distracted me. Their innocence reminded me that life still moved forward, even when mine felt like it had stalled. I started applying for other jobs, casting a wider net than I'd planned. I updated my CV in between grocery runs and reading German fairy tales out loud to a 5-year-old who didn't care that I stumbled over the longer words. I began taking long walks alone, headphones in, face buried in a scarf, breathing deeply not because I had to but because I finally could. I realized that I had spent so many years shrinking myself to fit into Jack's world, making myself smaller, quieter, easier, just to be acceptable to a woman who would never see me as enough. And now, with every step I took down cobblestone streets I once ran across as a little girl, I felt myself reclaiming the space I had forgotten I deserved. No, I didn't have a wedding. I didn't have the life I thought I'd be building with the boy I once loved. But I had mornings filled with new air, afternoons shaped by small victories, and nights where the silence didn't ache quite so badly. I had started over. Alone, yes, but not lost. Not anymore. Then I found out the truth, and it hit me harder than I expected, even after everything that had already happened. I was sitting on the small balcony outside Vanessa's apartment, sipping lukewarm tea and scrolling through job listings I had no real hope for, when I got a message from Scott, Jack's old friend, someone I had always liked, someone who had stayed quiet during the chaos but never cruel, never unkind. He said he didn't know if he should tell me, but he couldn't stop thinking about it, and it didn't sit right with him anymore. So I told him to just say it. And he did. He told me that Jack was the one who told his mother about my condition. It happened when he went to ask my mom for the family ring. A tradition in their family, some gesture of respect that was supposed to mean something. He had gone to her with excitement, apparently ready to make it official, ready to propose. But when my mom asked if we planned to start a family soon, Jack just blurted it out. He told her I couldn't have children. Just like that. Not gently. Not privately. Not with any sense of awareness about how sacred, how personal, how vulnerable that part of my life was. He offered it up like trivia, like a minor fact that might be relevant to the conversation. Scott said Jack didn't even realize what he'd done. He thought he was being honest. He thought it would show transparency or commitment or something equally misguided. But what he actually did was hand Diane the perfect weapon, gift-wrapped and sharp-edged. The moment she heard those words, Scott said, her entire demeanor changed. She went quiet for a moment, too quiet, and then she said, "No. That ring isn't going to someone who can't carry this family forward." And just like that, the wheels of her campaign against me began turning. Jack didn't argue. He didn't push back. He didn't even think to come home and warn me. He didn't protect me. He let her run with it, let her twist it into something ugly and shameful, let her turn me into a target. And the worst part is, I had no idea. I had spent months thinking she had found out through someone else, that maybe she overheard or connected dots, or pried where she shouldn't have. But no, Jack gave it to her. He handed her the most fragile part of me, and then he stood there while she smashed it. I sat there on that balcony for a long time, the phone still in my hand, my tea going cold in my lap. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to go back in time and warn myself not to trust him so fully, not to believe that love alone was enough to keep someone from betraying you. But instead, I just sat in silence, staring out over the rooftops of a city that felt more like home than he ever had, and I realized that this truth, painful as it was, also set me free. Because now I knew for certain, I hadn't lost a partner. I had escaped someone who never truly stood beside me when it mattered most. Then came the arrest. I found out about it through a frantic message from an old mutual friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in months but who still followed the quiet unraveling of everything from the sidelines. The message was short, just a link to a local news article and one sentence, "I thought you should know." I clicked the link with a trembling hand, already feeling that drop in my stomach, the one that comes before a truth you're not ready for. There it was, his name in black and white. Jack had been arrested for assault. The victim, his mother. According to the report, it happened during an argument at her home. Neighbors called the police after hearing shouting and glass breaking. When they arrived, they found Diane bruised, shaken, and Jack visibly intoxicated, ranting about how she had ruined his life. He had hit her. Not once. Multiple times. The article didn't go into graphic detail, but it was enough to make me sit there frozen, staring at the screen like I was seeing someone I used to love through a fogged window I could no longer wipe clean. I found out more over the next few days. That he had spiraled hard after everything, after I left, after his family fractured, after the silence closed in around him. He started drinking heavily, lost his job within a month of our breakup, stopped paying rent, and had to move back in with his parents. That in itself was a disaster waiting to happen. His pride couldn't stand it, and his mother, unyielding, manipulative, cruel, only made it worse. They fought constantly, and it finally exploded into something physical, something ugly, something irreversible. I sat in Vanessa's kitchen, reading update after update, each one twisting the knife deeper. I kept thinking about the boy I met when I was 9, the man who once held my hand as I buried my father, the partner who told me he loved me even when the world felt like it was falling apart. I kept asking myself how that boy became this man, this bitter, broken version of someone I once thought I'd grow old with. And maybe the scariest part was realizing that I didn't even see it coming. That I had loved someone capable of such violence, and I never saw the cracks forming until they shattered. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel satisfied. I felt sick, sad, hollow. Because for all the damage Jack had done to me, I had still, somewhere deep down, hoped he would find his way back to himself. That he would heal. That he would learn. But instead, he had become everything his mother had feared, and everything she had, in some twisted way, helped create. And I was half a world away, rebuilding a life from ashes, and suddenly more grateful than ever that I got out when I did. He called. I didn't recognize the number at first. It was one of those blocked IDs that usually meant spam or some forgotten bureaucratic office. But something in my gut told me to answer. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was closure. Maybe some part of me, the part that still ached when I heard his name, just needed to hear it one last time. I picked up, said hello, and then there was silence for a moment. Then his voice, broken, hoarse, trembling in a way I hadn't heard since the night his father was hospitalized years ago. He was crying. Not the silent kind, not the dignified kind, but the desperate, helpless sobbing of someone who had already lost everything and only just realized how much it cost him. He asked me to come back. He said my name like it was the only thing keeping him upright. He told me he had made mistakes, that he had let the wrong people speak into our life, that he had been weak, that he hadn't known how to fight for me until it was too late. He said he loved me. That he had always loved me. That no matter what had happened, no matter how far we had drifted or how broken things had become, he still thought of me every day. I listened. I sat on the edge of my bed in that little flat in Hamburg, surrounded by unpacked boxes and the quiet of a new life, and I listened to the man who had once been everything to me beg for a second chance. He promised things: therapy, honesty, separation from his mother, a fresh start somewhere far away. He said he would do anything. That he just needed one more chance to prove he could be the man I thought he was. And for a moment I wanted to believe him. Not because I trusted him anymore, but because I remembered the boy he used to be. The one who shared my secrets under the stars. The one who held my hand at my father's funeral. The one who painted the walls of our first apartment and laughed when we both ended up covered in mint green splatters. That boy deserved forgiveness. But the man on the phone wasn't him anymore. He had stood by while his mother dismantled me. He had chosen her silence over my voice. He had handed her my deepest vulnerability and watched her use it like a blade. And when I needed him most, when the world turned cruel and I was on my knees trying to hold on to something real, he walked away. Or worse, he stood there and let it all happen. So I told him the truth. I said I hoped he healed. I said I hoped he became the man he so badly wanted to be. But I wasn't coming back. Not because I didn't love the version of us that once existed, but because that version had died the moment he stopped protecting me. His mother destroyed our relationship, yes, but he helped her. And that was something no apology could unwrite. I hung up, softly, and let the silence fall around me like a final goodbye. I'm not coming back. That much I know now with a clarity I didn't have when I first stepped off the plane, or when I cried myself to sleep in a stranger's guest room, or when I packed the remnants of a life I thought would last forever. I'm not returning to the place where I lost myself, to the man who let me be torn apart piece by piece while he stood by and watched. But I forgive him. Not for his sake, he'll have to live with his choices, but for mine. Because carrying bitterness only anchors me to the past, and I have no intention of standing still. I hold no grudges. Not against him. Not even against her. Let them live in the house they built out of judgment and control, the walls so tight they can barely breathe. I won't be haunting those rooms. I won't be looking back. I am moving forward, step by shaky step, breath by honest breath, into something new. A new life. A new country. A version of myself that no longer waits to be chosen, no longer shrinks to be accepted, no longer apologizes for existing in a way that some people couldn't understand. Hamburg feels more like home every day. I'm finding rhythm in small things. The way the light hits the windows in the morning, the smell of fresh bread on my way to the tram, the laughter of Vanessa's children when they try to teach me new words I've long forgotten. I'm building something from the ground up, and it may not be perfect, but it's mine. Entirely mine. Maybe someday I will fall in love again. Maybe it will be slow and quiet or sudden and loud, or maybe it will sneak up on me when I least expect it. But if it happens, it will be with someone who sees all of me and never once tries to trade my worth for someone else's approval. It will never be with the man who handed me over to his mother like a problem to be solved. That door is closed. And behind it, I've left the ashes of a love that didn't survive the fire. What's ahead of me is uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it feels like freedom.